Welcome to the Wife Stories YouTube channel. New video every day, and don't forget to subscribe. Here we go.
I'm deleting the pictures on my phone, one by one, in the dim light of the kitchen. The glow from the screen is too bright, and my eyes burn, but I can't stop. Each swipe is an execution. A photo of Elena Walker at the beach, one of us at the Grand Canyon, another at last year's office party. Gone. I keep thinking about the difference between erase and delete, how the phone says delete, but it feels more like erase, as if I'm wiping away something I once held sacred. Next to me on the counter sits an ashtray full of cigarettes I never smoked. That brand isn't mine. It's not even Elena's brand. She doesn't smoke. It must be his. It has to be Jake Walker's, my brother's cigarettes, left behind, reeking of betrayal. I stare at them, feeling my breath hitch, feeling my pulse spike in my neck. I drop my phone on the counter, rest both hands on the edge, and close my eyes. The world spins. I can't hold it in. I fling the ashtray. Cigarette butts scatter across the floor. My throat stings from the shout I wasn't even aware I let out. Anger hums through my veins. My living room is dark except for the lamp in the corner, throwing weak light on the wall. I can see pictures there too, framed photos of me and her and me, the perfect couple. We used to be, or maybe we just pretended. I almost want to smash those frames, but I hold back. Instead, I feel my entire body trembling, so I rest my forehead against the wall, closing my eyes. I try to breathe. I remember how it started, how naive I was only a few days ago. I had just come back to New York after a business trip. Jake Walker insisted on throwing a party for me. He was my younger brother, always more impulsive, more flamboyant. I told him, "Jake, I'm tired. You don't have to do this." But he laughed it off. "Man, we haven't seen you in weeks. Come on, let me celebrate your return." Elena Walker agreed. "It'll be good to see people again." And so, we had a living room full of coworkers, neighbors, folks from the gym, people I barely knew. They drank my beer, ate my snacks, and told me how lucky I was to have a brother like Jake. He was the life of the party. I just nodded, feeling old, worn out from the travel, wanting only to curl up on the couch with Elena Walker and watch something mindless. But instead, I forced a smile. I tried to be a good host. It's eerie how I can replay it all now, searching for the signs. The way she laughed a little too eagerly at Jake's jokes. The way he leaned in, arm brushing against hers. I was on the other side of the room, messing with the drink station, or maybe shaking hands with some bored colleague. It's so easy to miss, especially when you've spent half your life trusting someone. Even now, I can taste that moment's confusion in my mouth, like a bitter, metallic tang. But I shrugged it off then. Later that night, people left in little clusters, half drunk and giggling. Jake Walker slapped me on the back. "That was great," he said, his voice too bright. "You needed this, big guy." I just offered a weak laugh. Then he was gone, out the door. Elena Walker was clearing bottles, too quiet. I asked if everything was okay, and she smiled, said she was tired. "Let's just go to bed." We did. She curled away from me. I told myself it was just the usual exhaustion after hosting a crowd. That night, I was too tired to notice how distant she felt, how stiff her shoulders were when I reached out. 2 nights later, I realized everything was wrong. I hadn't slept well in weeks, so I got out of bed, telling Elena Walker I needed air. She mumbled something I didn't catch. I slipped on my coat and left the apartment, walked down the block. That's when a stupid paranoia seized me, a voice in my head. "Go back. Just see." What if? It made no sense, but I followed that voice. I crept back upstairs, quietly let myself in. The lights were off. The bedroom was empty. She was gone. My heart pounded. Then I saw the text messages on her phone, half lit on the nightstand. From Jake. From my own brother, telling her he was already at the hotel, room key under her name. Or was it under his name? I couldn't see clearly. My vision blurred with shock. I went downstairs, waited in the entryway, hidden behind a column. I saw her come in the front door, stepping out of a taxi, wearing a short coat that barely covered her thighs. And she was wearing nothing underneath. That was our thing. Alina Walker used to surprise me like that. If we were going out to a fancy dinner and she wanted to tease me. But that night, it wasn't for me. My stomach twisted so hard I thought I would vomit. She had a keycard in one hand, her phone in the other. She was texting. I didn't rush out to confront her. I didn't hurl accusations then and there. Instead, I felt a numbness, a sense that the world had cracked open, the floor about to give way. She checked her phone again, pacing in the lobby. I guessed she was texting Jake. The doorman nodded politely to her, oblivious. She kept looking around, obviously waiting for him to come in. But he didn't show. She wrote something on her phone. I felt my own phone vibrate in my pocket a moment later. Her text to me, probably. "Where are you?" The cynicism of it stung, but I just stood there, silent in the shadows. I followed her to the elevator. She rode it up alone. I took the stairs, my heart hammering. Every step felt like a betrayal to my own sense of reason. I could have marched in, thrown accusations, demanded explanations, but I did none of that. I was too cold inside, too numb. On the 8th floor, I waited, listened for her footsteps. She slipped into a room, closed the door behind her. I let a minute pass, then used my own key. I didn't storm in, I just turned the handle, and it opened. She never expected me to follow her so quietly. The room smelled of fresh linen, the white bed turned down. There was a bottle of red wine on the table, 2 glasses. She froze when she saw me. Alina Walker's coat was half undone, the collar askew, revealing that she wore nothing but that coat. My voice shook, but I tried to keep it soft. "Expecting someone else?" I asked. She stammered, tried to pull the coat closed. I was waiting for you," she lied, that attempt at a normal voice. A pause. "What are you doing here?" A second lie. I could see the fear in her eyes, the shame, but also something raw, some leftover adrenaline from a plan that had gone wrong. I nearly laughed at the absurdity. I stepped forward and locked the door behind me. "Where's Jake?" I asked, plain and quiet. She swallowed, her face going pale. He's not coming." "No," I said, my voice trembling with repressed fury. "He's not coming." I looked at the wine glasses, the single bed with crisp white sheets. I picked up the bottle, poured myself some. My hand shook, nearly spilling. I took a sip, bitter, cheap, nothing special. But for some reason, it calmed me. Alina Walker backed away, clutching the coat around her. She tried to speak, but couldn't form the words. I set my glass down and repeated the same question. "Where's Jake?" She opened her mouth, closed it. I must have asked it 3 times, letting the question hammer into the air. It wasn't that I needed an answer. I wanted her to feel it. What she'd done, who she'd done it with. Finally, she answered with a broken whisper. "I don't know." That was it. And I realized that was the truth. Jake had bailed on her, leaving her alone in a hotel room meant for their secret rendezvous. The anger roared inside me, but I forced it down. I took another sip of wine, stared at her, tried to see the woman I married, the woman who once laughed at my jokes, cried on my shoulder, who used to bring me coffee in bed. All I saw was a stranger. That's when I quietly said, "You must be tired of waiting, Alina Walker. Sit down. Let me tell you how love dies." She shook her head, tears burning her cheeks, but I kept talking. My voice was calm, but inside I was unhinged, each word an explosion. "It doesn't happen all at once. It's slow. You chip away at it, one lie, one secret at a time, until there's nothing left but regret." I repeated that last word, regret. She crumpled onto the edge of the bed. I could see she was shaking, but not from the cold. I stepped closer, still holding the wine glass. Love dies almost gently, I said, like it wants you to feel every inch of pain before it's gone. I was trembling. She tried to reach out, but I set the wine aside and turned my back. I didn't scream. That would come later, in a different form. But in that moment, I simply picked up my keys and walked out. Left her there in the room that she and Jake had prepared. Left her to wonder what would happen next. I heard her call my name, but I didn't look back. I took the elevator down, my legs feeling like lead. The doorman didn't even glance at me. Outside, the city lights blurred in a cold drizzle. I had nowhere to go, so I walked, half the night, until exhaustion forced me back to our apartment. She wasn't there. She must have stayed in that room or gone somewhere else. Part of me was relieved. The next morning, I found her in the kitchen, pale and sleepless, like she'd been waiting. She tried to speak, but I just walked past her. I said nothing. Silence was my weapon now. She followed me, touched my shoulder. I shrugged her hand off. "Daniel," she said, her voice breaking. I turned. I asked a single question. "Why?" She had no answer. She stammered something about me never being around, about Jake showing her attention. It was all just nonsense, holes in a story, excuses. I repeated my question, my voice rising. "Why?" She tried to approach, but I moved away. "Don't you dare," I hissed. "Don't you dare pretend this is my fault." She reached for me again, and I lost it. My anger flared like a blowtorch. I wanted to show her all the raging hate inside me. I wanted her to understand that betrayal doesn't just hurt, it contaminates everything. My voice cracked as I said, "No, you made your choice." Then I repeated it. "You made your choice," again and again, each time stepping closer until she pressed her back to the wall, fear in her eyes. When I finally stopped, my fists were clenched at my sides, and I realized I was panting like an animal. She choked out, "I'm sorry. Daniel, I'm so sorry." I stared at her, feeling the weight of those words. Sorry. Useless. Empty. She had no idea how deep she'd cut me. I left the apartment again. The day was a haze of confusion. My mind kept returning to Jake Walker, my own brother, who used to follow me around as a kid, who once saved up to buy me a silly watch when I graduated from college. The same brother who took me to a bar after my first breakup, slung an arm around my shoulders, said, "We're family, man." That's the guy who found a way into my wife's bed. I felt that old brotherly bond twist into a knot of disgust. I dialed his number, my hands shaking. He didn't pick up. He must have known I'd found out. Rage boiled in me. I couldn't stand to see him, but I also had to see him. Every moment felt wrong, like a gear inside my chest was shattered, spinning uselessly. That evening, I went to the small bar near my office. I sat in a corner booth, swirling whiskey in my glass. People came and went, but I barely noticed. My phone lit up with messages. From Elena Walker, from Jake Walker, from mutual friends. I didn't answer any of them. The whiskey burned, fueling an anger so large I could hardly contain it. But mostly, I felt hollow. That was the worst part. The sense of emptiness, of a life wasted. I left the bar eventually. Wandered again. Rain slicked the sidewalks, turned them into mirrors. I saw my reflection. A ghost of a man, shoulders bowed, eyes full of something I couldn't name. I got home late, found Elena Walker waiting in the living room. She started to speak, but I walked by without a word, locked myself in the bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed, head in my hands, until my mind numbed enough to let me sleep. Jake Walker showed up the next day. I heard his voice in the hallway before I saw him. He was talking to Elena, or trying to. She told him to leave. "You're not helping," I heard her say. He insisted. My stomach twisted in knots. Then he tried to step inside, and I was there, blocking him. Our eyes met. We both froze. He opened his mouth, no doubt to start with some apology, some rationalization. But I didn't let him speak. I shoved him back into the hallway. He stumbled. Then I grabbed a fistful of his jacket. My voice was low, menacing. "You come here to gloat?" I asked. He shook his head, eyes wide. "No, man, I just..." I cut him off. "You thought you'd do me a favor? Let me see your face so I'd know who destroyed my marriage." He tried to push my arm away. "Stop it. Just listen. It wasn't planned. It happened so fast. We didn't mean to." That sentence made my blood boil. I repeated, "Didn't mean to." And then I laughed, a hollow bark of laughter. "You planned a hotel room. You had your cigarettes in my apartment. You threw a party for me, for God's sake, while you were screwing my wife." I lost control, shoved him against the wall so hard I felt the thud reverberate. He grimaced but didn't fight back. Maybe guilt overcame him. Maybe shock. But I hated him for his passivity, for the idea that he might be some victim of circumstance. From inside the apartment, Alina Walker was calling my name. I turned, glared at her. "Stay out of this," I spat. Then I turned back to Jake. My voice was ragged, barely recognizable. "I gave you everything, you son of a bitch. I told you everything about my life. I let you into my home. How could you?" He closed his eyes, tears welling. But I had no sympathy left. My entire body trembled with rage. "Don't you dare cry," I hissed, repeating it. "Don't you dare." Finally, he found his voice. "I'm sorry, Daniel. I never wanted to hurt you." I let him go. He sagged against the wall, eyes pleading. I heard Alina Walker sobbing behind me, but I refused to look at her. Jake tried to continue. "I'm sorry, man, I cut him off again. "Go. Leave. If I see you again." I didn't finish that threat. I didn't have to. He straightened, glanced at Alina, then walked away. The corridor felt vacuum-sealed. I just stood there, chest heaving. Alina Walker approached me, put a hand on my shoulder. I jerked away so fast I almost slipped. She started crying again, and for a second, I glimpsed genuine remorse in her eyes. But it didn't matter. Nothing could fix the rotting thing that used to be our marriage. She whispered, "Daniel, talk to me. Please." I repeated, "You made your choice," like a mantra, refusing to say anything else. Then I turned and headed back inside, shutting the door in her face. She didn't knock. I spent hours on the couch, staring at nothing. My phone buzzed. My parents, Jake's parents too, were trying to reach me. I couldn't face them. That night, I told Alina Walker to leave. She asked if she could stay the night. I said, "No." My voice cracked. "No." I repeated it until she had no choice but to pack a small bag and walk out. She paused at the door, tears streaming, her lips quivering. I said nothing, just watched her go. The silence after she left was so immense, I felt it pressing on my eardrums. In the following days, I existed like a machine. Wake up, shower, go to work, avoid everyone, come home, sit in darkness. Repeat. I started sleeping on the couch. I'd stare at the framed pictures around the apartment, noticing details I'd never seen before. Her half smile, my awkward posture, the little shadows in the corners. I remembered that time in Seattle, when we visited my parents and all four of us went fishing. Jake included. Had it already started? The question gnawed at me, made me sick with jealousy. My fists would clench involuntarily at the thought of them sneaking around behind my back. I felt like a fool. I also felt an echoing emptiness, as if I'd lost a piece of myself. That emptiness was even worse than the rage. One afternoon, I started throwing out old things. Photos, souvenirs from trips, even some of Alina Walker's clothing. I piled it all in black trash bags. I found a gift she once gave me, a pair of cufflinks engraved with my initials. I threw them across the room. They clattered on the floor. Next, I came across an old letter from her, a sweet note from our first anniversary. I paused. My hands trembled. Then I fed it to the shredder. The sound of paper being destroyed felt like a twisted lullaby. I repeated this process, not even sure what I was doing. It was like I had to rid myself of her presence. That evening, I realized I still needed closure, some final confrontation. My mind churned with ideas of revenge, but I couldn't pinpoint how to strike without sinking to their level. That's when it hit me. I'd give Elena Walker the same emptiness she gave me. She was texting me constantly, wanting to talk, wanting to fix us. All I gave her was silence. She'd call me, and I wouldn't pick up. She'd ring my doorbell, and I'd stay locked in. Meanwhile, I was plotting something more theatrical, more brutal. A few nights later, I invited her to meet me in a quiet hotel lounge downtown, ironically the same chain as the one she had used with Jake. She arrived looking exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pinned back too tightly. She approached me at a corner table. The lounge was half empty, dimly lit. I stood when she came over, my posture rigid. She looked up at me, her voice trembling. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." I just nodded. She sat down across from me. For a moment, she seemed relieved, like maybe I was ready to forgive. But then I leaned forward, speaking softly. "I want to hear it all. Everything. How long? Where? When? Spare no detail." She flinched. I repeated my demand in a monotone. "Spare no detail." She swallowed hard, looked around as if to find an escape. I stared her down. Slowly, haltingly, she confessed. It started a few months ago. They were texting. A rush of excitement. It just happened. She teared up. "Daniel, I was lonely. You were gone. We lost each other." I just nodded, letting her talk, letting her try to rationalize her betrayal. Her words were staccato, punctuated by little sobs. Finally, she reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled back. I repeated, "When else did you meet him?" Her lip trembled. She mentioned another hotel, a night he was in town. She said, "It was never serious. It was a mistake." I stared into her eyes, then said, "You called a mistake repeated multiple times. That's not a mistake. That's a choice." She began to cry harder. I felt no sympathy. I was prepared for a confrontation, but the reality was colder, more hollow. She'd done what she'd done, and now she was rummaging for words to justify it. I leaned back, voice flat. "Is that all? Or is there more?" She shook her head, tears dripping onto the table. "That's all," she whispered. I gave a short, bitter laugh. "Well," I said, "now we're done." She stared at me, confusion crinkling her brow. "What do you mean?" I repeated it. "We're done," letting each word fall like a hammer. Then I stood, put down some cash for our drinks, and walked out without a backward glance. I heard her footsteps behind me, her choked sob. "Daniel," she called, but I kept walking. Her voice rose in desperation. "Daniel Walker." I paused. She was using my full name, the same way I used hers. There was a wretched irony in it. I turned to face her. She was trembling, arms wrapped around herself. The lounge doors swung shut behind her. "Please," she said. "We can fix this. Just talk to me." I felt an eruption of fury at her words. "Fix this." As if. "You think a few tears will fix what you've destroyed?" I repeated that question. "You think it'll fix it?" She closed her eyes, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. A group of hotel guests paused, looking at us uncertainly, then walked around. The tension was thick. I took one step forward, leaning in so only she could hear. "The only thing left to do," I whispered, "is bury this marriage. You and Jake saw to that." Her face contorted. A fresh wave of sobbing threatened to split her apart. She tried to grab my arm, but I jerked away. "Don't," I said, voice sharper than I intended. I repeated it. "Don't." Then I turned and walked into the elevator, leaving her behind in that empty hallway. The doors slid shut, and I sank against the mirrored wall, my reflection mocking me. My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. But somewhere inside me, I felt a grim satisfaction. I had inflicted a fraction of the pain she gave me. That night, I slept in my lonely apartment, if you could call it sleep. Time passed in a numb blur after that. Jake Walker tried calling me from random numbers. I blocked them all. My mother left voicemail after voicemail, her voice cracking with worry. "Daniel, please, talk to us." But I couldn't. Not yet. I was too broken, too furious. The only calls I answered were from my divorce attorney. Yes, I wanted to proceed. Yes, I'd move out or she would. I didn't care which. Let Elena Walker have the apartment if she wanted it. I'd find somewhere else. This city was big enough. She texted me once, "I'll sign anything, just please don't hate me." I stared at that message for a long time. Hate her. That would imply I still cared enough to muster hate. The truth was, I felt drained of all normal emotion. Something deeper than hate had taken root in me. A cold, silent fury that overshadowed everything else. A few nights later, I realized I wasn't done. My anger had nowhere to go, so it began to gnaw at me from the inside. On an impulse, I decided to confront Jake Walker again. He had recently texted me from a new number. "Can we talk? Please, bro." I told him to meet me at an all-night diner near the East River. He agreed, probably relieved I was willing to see him. When he arrived, he looked like he'd aged 5 years. Hair disheveled, clothes rumpled. He sat across from me in a booth while I sipped black coffee. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he tried to apologize again. He said it with trembling sincerity, tears in his eyes. "I messed up, Daniel. I never wanted to break your family apart." I watched him silently. He reached a hand across the table, but I recoiled as if from a snake. I repeated, "Never wanted to break my family." Then I laughed bitterly. "Jake, you didn't just break it. You shattered it." He flinched. "I know. I'm sorry." Over and over, he said it like some chant. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." The words slid off me like oil on water. He tried to explain how it began, how he and Elena Walker ended up closer, exchanging messages, how the guilt built up. "I swear," he said, "I was going to stop. But then I felt stuck. I cared about her. I didn't want to hurt you." I repeated, "Didn't want to hurt me," raising my voice. The diner waitress glanced over, but I ignored her. "That's exactly what you did," I said, each syllable a bullet. "And if you truly cared, you'd never have touched her." He hung his head. I stared at him, searching for a shred of sincerity. Part of me wanted to punch him again, to see blood. Another part wanted to collapse in tears. Instead, I just shook my head. "We're done," I said, repeating it slowly. "You were my brother, but now we're done." He begged me to let him fix this. I told him he couldn't. Then I stood, threw down enough money to cover my coffee, and walked out. He followed me onto the sidewalk. The dawn was breaking, painting the sky in cold gray. "Daniel, wait," he called. I stopped, turned around, my face contorted with anger. "Jake," I said, "you and I have no more words to share." He tried to speak, but I cut him off. "If you want to make amends, live your life knowing what you did." I repeated it, "knowing what you did," letting the weight of those words hang in the damp morning air. Then I turned and left him standing there, alone. By the time the divorce was finalized, weeks had passed. The tension had turned into a dull ache. I moved out of the apartment, found a small place in Midtown. Minimal furniture, mostly boxes. I avoided social events, took a leave from my job, told them I had personal matters. They understood, or pretended to. Elena Walker texted me once more. "I'm letting you go, but I miss you every day." I stared at that message, uncertain what I felt. Pity. Disgust. Maybe both. I typed a single reply. "Don't contact me again." Then I blocked her number. Life became a series of mechanical actions. Eat, sleep, try to fill the hours. I turned to running, pounding the pavement until my lungs burned, as if I could outrun the memories. But no matter how many miles I covered, they trailed me like ghosts. Sometimes I'd catch myself replaying the night I found out, the coat she wore, the scent of cheap red wine in that hotel room. My heart would race, my fists clench. Other times, I'd think of the good memories, and an ache would fill my chest, some mix of sadness and nostalgia. But mostly, I was numb. About a month later, I heard from our mutual friend, a coworker from my old job, that Elena Walker had moved out of the city, presumably heading south to be near her parents. Jake Walker, meanwhile, traveled often, bouncing between Chicago and other branches of his fitness network. People asked me if I'd forgive him eventually. I had no answer. All I knew was that the man I'd once called brother was now a stranger. The woman I'd once called wife was someone I could hardly think of without feeling my stomach turn. And me. I was just a shell, drifting in a new apartment with no real attachments. Sometimes, in the early morning, I'd watch the city skyline, thinking about how so many people lived side by side, each harboring secrets. My mind would wander to that last night in the hotel room, the quiet confrontation, the hush before the storm. I realized that was the moment my soul fractured. Not when I saw the text or found her in the lobby, but when she looked at me, eyes filled with guilt, and I felt absolutely nothing. That was the final betrayal, not her cheating, but the death of my ability to care. One evening, I found myself back in front of the old apartment building. I don't even remember deciding to go there. I just ended up on the sidewalk, staring at the doors, the lobby lights flickering behind the glass. I thought of that night I caught Elena Walker sneaking in from the taxi, wearing that coat. A wave of nausea twisted my gut. I looked up, saw the 8th floor windows. I pictured the deserted bedroom. Then a security guard shot me a suspicious glance. I turned away, heading down the street, telling myself I had no reason to be there anymore. The past was a graveyard, best left undisturbed. Eventually, the uncontrollable rage subsided. What replaced it was a certain hardness, a shield around my heart. I went to a counselor a couple of times, but everything I said sounded hollow and forced. The counselor asked me about closure, about possibly forgiving them for my own peace of mind. I refused. Never, I said. She suggested that letting go of hatred might help me heal. I repeated, never, quietly but firmly. The session ended. I never went back. A few days later, I started packing the remainder of my old belongings. That's when I came across the pictures on my laptop. Those old, smiling snapshots of me and Elena Walker, me and Jake Walker. Some from our childhood fishing trips, some from my wedding day. I stared at them for a long time, that strange heaviness in my chest growing. Then, without ceremony, I selected them all and hit delete. The computer asked me if I was sure. I clicked yes. Then I emptied the trash. The beep sounded like a small punctuation mark at the end of a long, agonizing sentence. Shortly after that, I found myself in the kitchen again, looking at an ashtray I'd brought from the old place, remembering how I hurled it across the room. I realized I felt calm now, calmer than I'd been in weeks or months. Not happy, not relieved, just numb. That numbness was my new normal. I recognized that. I accepted it. In some twisted way, I realized the worst part wasn't the affair. It was that, in the end, I hardly cared anymore. I'd become the thing I never wanted to be. Indifferent. Even the anger was gone, replaced by a cold acceptance. Some might call it growth. Others might call it a new kind of death. One day, I got a letter in the mail from Elena Walker. She must have found my new address. I tossed it unopened into the trash. Whatever words she wrote, they couldn't help me. They couldn't fix the jagged glass inside me. Another message came a week later. Same outcome. I developed a routine. Check mail, throw out anything from her, ignoring the pang of curiosity in my gut. If she wanted to say she was sorry, again, I didn't need to hear it. If she wanted to say she still loved me, well, that was worthless. The final day to finalize the divorce came. We went our separate ways. That was that. Jake Walker tried to call me once more around then. Another unknown number. I recognized his voice the moment I answered. He said, "Daniel, I know you hate me, but I cut him off. I don't hate you. That would be too much effort." Silence. Then I repeated it in a hollow tone. "I don't hate you." And I ended the call. I blocked the number. There was nothing else to discuss. With that, the last tie to my old life snapped. I wish I could say I found some grand redemption, that I discovered a cause, found new love, or soared free. But the truth is, life just went on. I found a new job eventually, smaller scale, less stress. I made polite conversation with neighbors, started going to the gym, focusing on weights, maybe to match Jake Walker's physique in some twisted competition he'd never see. But it didn't bring me real satisfaction. I dated casually once or twice, had no illusions about anything serious. The scars were too fresh, or maybe I just wasn't ready to care again. Still, sometimes, late at night, I remember that moment in the hotel room. The hush, the scent of wine, and Elena Walker's eyes pleading with me. I feel a faint echo of longing. Longing for what we had before it all went wrong. Then the memory of her with my brother hits me like a punch to the gut, and the longing morphs into a sick revulsion. I bury it, push it down, suffocate it with the knowledge that I survived. I remind myself, it's better to be alone than to let that rot seep back into my life. I learned one thing. The scariest part of betrayal is not the act itself. It's the realization that you can lose the capacity to care. Once you cross that threshold, there's no returning to who you used to be. You become someone else, someone you might not recognize in the mirror, but at least you know you won't be wounded the same way again. That's the place I live in now. A place she can't enter, a fortress of silence and cold acceptance, where forgiveness is out of reach. Elena Walker and Jake Walker might appear in my future at some family event or random crossing of paths. Maybe I'll nod politely, maybe I'll walk away. But I'll never let them close again. The gap between us is too wide, filled with too many broken promises and shards of trust. And if they ever attempt to bridge it, they'll find I've built high walls with no doors. I'm done. Truly done. Tonight, as I sit in my half-furnished living room, I look at the few possessions I've allowed myself to keep. A couch, a table, my running shoes by the door. My phone rests on the windowsill. No missed calls. No messages. I feel an odd sense of peace in the emptiness. I close my eyes, remembering the moment I saw her stepping out of that taxi, wearing nothing but a short coat. I remind myself how my heart shattered in that moment. Then I picture the hotel room confrontation, how I left her alone in that bed meant for me to be buried. And I realize, as much as it all hurts, at least it's over. At least there's no more waiting for the next betrayal. No more illusions about Jake Walker or the woman I once adored. I stand, walk to the kitchen, pick up the ashtray. I chuckle darkly, thinking about all the times I wanted to smash it, wanted to see it shatter. But I don't. Instead, I place it in a cabinet, out of sight. Then I turn off the lights, letting the darkness settle around me. I climb into bed, alone, letting the city noises lull me. It's not a happy ending, but it's an ending. And that's enough. For now, that's all I can handle. Tomorrow, I'll wake up, put on my running shoes, and continue to exist. The rest, love, hate, revenge, seems irrelevant in the face of this numbness. In that sense, I'm free. And maybe, in some twisted way, that's the only freedom left after a betrayal this deep. The freedom to not care anymore.